Coming up now, it is getting to yes on climate change. Why are we having this conversation? Well, all day, of course, we have been talking about accelerating action when it comes to sustainable energy, especially when it comes to plans and policy, for example. The big question now is the how. And we have an inspirational talk now, really a special treat. I know I promised you this earlier in the day, and we're going to deliver on it now, so don't go away if you're still with us. We're joined now by William Ury. He is co-founder of the Climate Parliament and author, mediator, and co-founder of the Program on Negotiation at Harvard Law School. There will be time, by the way, for you to present your questions directly to William, actually, directly after this session. So do get those questions ready. And if you would like to ask one of them of him, what you need to do is send a direct message to Otalia Sacco. Again, let me repeat that. Send a direct message, especially if you're using the Hopin platform. That's the virtual interface that many of you are joining us on. Send a message to Otalia Sacco, and then she's going to prepare everything, give you a little bit of instructions about how it is that you can ask a question. So please, without any further ado, I'd like to give the floor now to William Ury. William.
Thank you, Sarah. And it's a huge pleasure to be joining you at the Vienna Energy Forum, where action meets ambition. And that's what I would like to talk to you about. Is my proposal to you is that where action meets ambition is through getting to yes. It's through negotiation. It's through collaborative problem solving. Because I think, as you probably heard from the previous speakers, the technical solutions, they're clearer, but how we get there, as Sarah just said, how do we make those decisions in the time that's required? That's the real question. And what's in the way are our differences. We have opposing interests, we have entrenched positions, we have deep distrust, we have many parties, the issues are very complex. How do we make the impossible possible? And that's what I want to talk to you about. My favorite story about impossible negotiations is an ancient one from the Middle East, and it's about three sons who receive from their father an inheritance of 18 camels. To the first son, the father leaves half the camels. To the second son, he leaves a third of the camels. And to the youngest son, he leaves a ninth of the camels. Well, the three sons get into a negotiation. 17 doesn't divide by 2, it doesn't divide by 3, it doesn't divide by 9. They start to argue with each other. They start to, might even get violent. And finally, in desperation, they go and they consult a wise old woman. The wise old woman thinks about their problem for a long time. And finally, she comes back and says, well, I don't know if I can help you, but if you want, you can have my camel. So the three sons say, okay. Then they have 18 camels. Well, 18 does divide by 2. So the first son takes his half. Half of 18 is 9. 18 does divide by 3. The second son takes his third, which is 6. 18 does divide by 9. And the third son takes his ninth, which is 2. If you add 9 and 6, you get 15 plus 2, 17. They have one camel left over. They give it back to the wise old woman. Now, if you think about that for a moment, it resembles a lot of the difficult, impossible negotiations that we get involved in around climate and around energy. There seems to be no way to divide up the camels. The key here is to step back from the situation, go to a place I like to call the balcony, a place of perspective where you can keep your eyes on the prize. You can see the big picture. And then look for what I call a golden bridge, which in this case is an 18th camel, some kind of solution that meets the interests of all sides. And then finally, because that's so difficult in these situations, you need what I call a third side, which is in this case a third party, the wise old woman, who can take the perspective of the whole, who can see what's good for the benefit of the whole family there. And you need those three ingredients. Those are the three magic ingredients for turning impossibility to possibility in my experience of 45 years of working on impossible conflicts. The balcony, the bridge, and the third side, which, just to make it short, I call BB3. It's the art of possibility. So I'd like you for a moment just to take a situation that you're currently facing, a negotiation, perhaps to do with climate and energy, where you're trying to influence a key decision maker. What I want you to do is pick someone in mind. Whose mind are you trying to change in that negotiation? It could be the leader of a country, the leader of your country, it could be the leader of another country, it could be the minister, it could be the head of a corporation. Pick one person that you're trying to negotiate with, and let me lead you for a moment through BB3 in your situation. You got a situation? So the question we always ask is, who can do what tomorrow morning to help accelerate the renewable energy transition? So who is that? Who's the leader you want to influence? Okay, so let's just start with balcony. What balcony is all about is that the fundamental principle of negotiation, the first step that we have to take, actually has nothing to do with the other side. There are difficult people to influence, but actually it turns out the most difficult person we have to influence is right here. It's ourselves. It's the person we look at in the mirror every morning. Because human beings were reaction machines. And when things get tough in conflicts and in these tough situations, emotions go high. And as the old saying goes, when angry, you will make the best speech you will ever regret. And as Gandhi said, an eye for an eye and we all go blind. So what do? We need to find ways to step back from the situation like that wise old woman. We need to step back to the balcony. The balcony is a metaphor. It's like everything is happening a play on the stage. You take a step back from that situation and you then ask yourself what's most important. You pause. What are your favorite ways of pausing in negotiations? What mine is to go for a walk in beautiful nature if I can. That actually puts me on the balcony. That gives me that calm perspective where I can actually not be reactive, where I can zoom in and ask, what's really important here? What's really important for you in this particular negotiation, for example, where you can zoom in and then you can zoom out and ask not only what are your interests, but also what's what I call your BATNA. BATNA is an acronym which stands for your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. If you cannot persuade that particular decision maker if you're not successful in that negotiation, what are you going to do to achieve your objective? The reason it's so important to know our BATNA is we want to reach agreement, of course. We want to be able to influence, but having that plan B, knowing that we have an alternative, gives us confidence, and that confidence gives us power. We'll be more powerful in that negotiation if we have an alternative, and we're more likely to get to an agreement. So that's balcony. That's the first step. The second step is the bridge. And here, the tendency is, in negotiation, when we're trying to influence a decision maker, and it's really important to us, we tend to push. That's the human tendency, is to push. But the more you push, of course, what do? They resist. And so you get nowhere. The secret of effective negotiation is to do the opposite of pushing, which is to attract. It's to draw them in the direction you want them to go. Imagine that your mind is right here. Their mind is over here. And you're saying, come over to my position. But it's not easy for them to go there. If you put yourself in their shoes for a moment, you'll see that, in fact, there's a giant chasm between where they are and where you are. And it's hard for them to cross that chasm. Their interests, they don't want to go there. Their constituents, they may lose money, may lose power, whatever their concern is. Our job is to build them a golden bridge across that chasm, to make it as easy as possible for them to make the decision we'd like them to make. Our job is not to push, but it's to attract, it's to draw them. That's the art of building them a golden bridge. And there's no more useful exercise in this than the thought experiment I call the victory speech. It's to, for a moment, imagine that they have made the decision you want them to make. That leader's decided they're going to set that target more ambitiously. They're going to implement the target that they've already set. Now imagine that they have to give a speech describing that to their people they care about, their constituents, their voters, their board of directors, whoever it is. Write out their victory speech. Think about it. What would be the key themes of that victory speech? What could they say that would make them look like a hero? Because that's our job in negotiations, to make the other look like a hero to the people that they care about. Write out their victory speech and then think about how to make it easier for them to make the decision you'd like them to make. That's the art of building them a golden bridge. Now imagine you've done that. You've actually written out their victory speech. You've actually looked for how to actually meet their interests. You know, what are their core interests? How can you meet their core interests? Now comes the third step, which is the third side, which is how do you help them get there? How do you help them cross that golden bridge and make the decision you'd like them to make? You know, the American president, FDR, once met with a group of activists, and they were telling him he's got to do something. And he said to them, you know, I agree with you utterly, wholeheartedly. I agree with you, absolutely. Now, go out and make me do it. And that's what we have to do. The politicians, the political leaders, they might agree with you, but they need that pressure, as it were, that constructive influence to actually help them. So here the key is to build, the third side is just a name for the surrounding community, which is latent often, but we have to mobilize that community and build what I would call a winning coalition for a yes, a winning coalition to help that decision maker make the decision you'd like them to make. So for example, just take out a sheet of paper and write down in one column, the winning coalition. Who is in support of this particular proposal? Who's in support of setting the target higher? Who's in support of implementing the target in this particular fashion? Write those organizations and individuals down in the winning coalition column. And then in the opposite column, write down the blocking coalition. Who's opposed to it? Who are the biggest opponents of that? And then think of your job as, how can you add people and organizations and countries to the winning coalition, and then focus in on the blocking coalition? Is there someone that you could try to influence so that they no longer block, or even better, move over to the winning coalition? That's how you build up the third side. So those are the basic three moves to make if you're trying to take impossible situations and move them to possible. First, go to the balcony, then build a golden bridge. Finally, activate the third side. Balcony, bridge, third side. BB3, the art of possibility. Now, this is not easy. This is some of the hardest work that human beings can do, negotiation. It's extremely complex. And the question is, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with it? You know, people often ask me, I've spent over 4 decades working in some of the most impossible conflicts in the world, from the Cold War to North Korea, to Venezuela, to Afghanistan, to the Middle East. And people ask me often, you know, are you an optimist or are you a pessimist? And I like to answer that actually I'm a possibilist. I actually believe in our human potential to be able to resolve our differences and get to yes. And I invite you to think too about joining me as a possibilist. Join the community of possibilists, if you will. And let me just give you one example. Almost 40 years ago, in 1982, I had the opportunity, the privilege of spending 3 months living in Vienna. I was a fellow at IASA, the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, which is a co-sponsor of the Vienna Energy Forum. It was the time of the Cold War. Austria was then on the front lines of the Cold War. The Iron Curtain ran very close by. Germany was divided. There was a heavy threat of nuclear war. And I watched, that's what I was there at IASA to work with my Soviet counterparts on, how do we reduce the risk of nuclear war? How do we transform the relationship? And I watched and participated over the next 7 years as something that people thought was absolutely impossible. Everyone thought it was absolutely impossible. that the Cold War would come to an end, that the Berlin Wall would fall. And yet it happened. And my suggestion to you is that's exactly what needs to happen now with energy, with climate. We need that same kind of mind shift, that same kind of shift that will allow us to get to where the planet needs to be, where humanity needs to be on energy and climate. So I would just say to you, just in concluding this talk, if we don't do it, who's going to do it? If not us, who? And if not now, when? So I wish you, I believe in you. I really do. I believe in all the activists, all the organizations, private, public, and nonprofit, working together in a united third side to bring about the changes we want. Thank you very much. Wishing you much success in getting to yes.
Thank you so much, William, for that inspirational talk, getting to yes on climate. Really appreciate hearing your insights and your advice in terms of, what people should do, how they should approach it. We have some reaction. We promised that the participants would be able to ask you some questions. Standing by for us is Liliana Morales. And, as we queue up Liliana, I just want to remind everyone that if you would like to ask a question yourself, just as Liliana is doing, just send a message over the virtual platform to Otalia Sacco. Liliana, the floor is yours. Please ask William what you would like to ask.
Hi, Knights. It's very nice to meet you both. Thank you for giving me the floor. My question is the following. How do you think your negotiation methods can help accelerate climate action? Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you, Liliana. What I envision is that there are teams of people taking particular decisions, and there are many decisions that need to be influenced if we're going to accelerate climate action, and a team on each one of them applying what I call this BB3 technology. And I'll give you an example. I'm privileged to have been a co-founder of something called the Climate Parliament 20 years ago, which is a forum, in person and virtual, of parliamentarians from around the world. Most of them are actually in developing countries, who are working together to find solutions to the climate crisis. And one of the initiatives of the Climate Parliament back just a few years ago in 2014 to 2016 was we helped organize a group of parliamentarians in India. And this group worked behind the scenes to see if we could double the renewable energy budget of India. Now, that's a huge country and a huge budget, but the idea was to double it. And so those parliamentarians worked as parliamentarians do. They put questions to the finance ministry. They held hearings. They wrote letters. And believe it or not, they doubled the renewable energy budget for the entire country of India. That's an example of what needs to be done. It's that coordinated work by teams, each one taking one of the decisions that needs to be made to accelerate the climate transition.
That's really fantastic. Thank you so much, William. I'd like to just follow up with a question to you, if I may, that comes from myself. And some of the things that you said really struck me, especially when you were talking about stepping back. I think you called it the balcony moment, for example. The title of this year's Vienna Energy Forum 2021 is Where Action Meets Ambition. And what we've been talking about all day is how to accelerate action, how this has to be the year of action. In fact, we've heard a number of representatives, and you can almost hear the frustration when they're talking about, targets not being met, that we're not on target, for example, to reach the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. So, I was wondering, when you hear step back, that seems to be the frustration among many, that there are too many out there who are indeed stepping back. So tell us why that is not counterintuitive, in fact. Right. Tell us why it does make sense in the year of action to actually step back.
Well, it's a really good question, Sarah. When I was a boy, I did long jump. And when you want to jump far, what do? You have to go back a few steps in order to go even further, right? So you step back to go forward. It's not just step back. You're stepping to the balcony to see, because it's so complex. It's like a play. There's so many things going on. You need a little bit of perspective to figure out exactly how you're going to act. You have to aim the action, and that's what you do from the balcony. And that's why it's so critical. If you think about negotiations, when have there been breakthroughs in negotiations? It's when people go to a place like, Camp David, or they go for a walk in the woods. They take a little step back, and then they make the breakthrough, and then they come back and inject that into the negotiations. And I think actually, the climate delegates in Glasgow and wherever they're going to be, if they just for a moment, Glasgow has some beautiful nature around it, just take a walk there and just think, how are we going to overcome this insuperable obstacle? And you'll get insights from nature, which is what it's all about, that will help you accelerate the decision-making process.
And
it's about going slow to go fast.
Oh, sorry, William. I didn't mean to interrupt you there. My apologies.
Not at all. But the motto is to go slow to go fast. Yeah.
Fantastic. No, I just wanted to ask you, as we're approaching COP26, for example, when people are indeed, if they take this strategy, if they are indeed stepping back, how important is it, or is it important at all, for example, to, kind of see the other perspective, the roadblock, the barrier that you are facing? And how would you recommend, other than taking a walk in nature, that people really can analyze it, dissect it, understand it, to then be able to make that leap? What are the tools that we need? What are the strategies in order to do that?
Absolutely, Sarah. In all the work that I've done, people would say, what's the most important skill for a negotiator? And I would say it's the ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes. And that's what you're just saying. In other words, if there's a block there, try to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Practice what I would call strategic empathy. In other words, it's empathy with a goal. Because if we're trying to, how can we possibly influence someone? In other words, change their mind, unless we already know where their mind is. And so the ability to actually just for a moment, leave our position, we may have the right position, put ourselves in the shoes of the other, see what they're facing. What are the pressures they're facing? What are their interests and so on? And then starting from there, that's the art of building the golden bridge. You start by listening. The way you put yourself in the other side's shoes is you listen. And if you observe successful negotiators, they listen far more than they talk. There's a saying that God gave us 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. It's to listen twice as much as we talk, to really, truly listen from within the frame of reference of the other side, not just to listen, as we often listen, which is, I disagree with this, I disagree with that, I disagree with that. No, put yourself in their shoes, listen from within their shoes, from within their skin, from within their perspective. And that's an art. It takes time, it takes effort, but it pays off richly, because I find that the negotiators who listen are the negotiators who are most successful.
That's really, really fascinating. So listening is as important as, laying out what it is that you want, what it is that you need. I'd just like to ask you in closing, before we go, because, this is all about setting up our world, of course, for future generations, providing a just transition. And, here at the Vienna Energy Forum, there was yesterday the first Youth Day, for example. The next generation, so motivated, so critical, so key in shaping the future. We've seen, a movement around, young people when it comes to action with regard to climate change. And I'm wondering, how you're viewing that through your lens as an expert master negotiator, and all of the accolades that, of course, that you bring to the table in that regard. And if you might have any advice for them, for the next generation now going forward.
Absolutely, Sarah. First of all, I would say anyone can do this. This is the work of human beings. Anyone can do this work of negotiation. You don't have to be a master negotiator. Anyone could do this. And in fact, the truth is, if you think about it, we all negotiate every day, all the time. We may negotiate with our friends. We might negotiate with our colleagues. We all have to put ourselves in other people's shoes. We all have to look for solutions that work for both sides. And so it's just about honing those skills over time. But you have those skills. You are a third sider. You are a negotiator. You are a possibilist. And in fact, it's the young people who give me hope, because I watch the energy, the vision, the initiative, the enthusiasm. And that's what's needed, really, to use, to go to the balcony, to build those bridges, to activate the third side so that we can make the impossible possible. It's young people who believe that the impossible is possible, and that's what's needed.
Fantastic. Great words to end on, William. And I just want to thank you so much for your time, for your perspective, your expertise, your insight, sharing it with us here at the Vienna Energy Forum. All the best to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Much success.
Fantastic. And that was the inspirational talk, Getting to Yes on Climate. And that now wraps up day one of the Vienna Energy Forum 2021. A couple of quick announcements for you. I'd just like to highlight the fact that it was a really big day here. And it's really evidenced, in fact, in the numbers. Check this out. There are more than 2,000 of you, in fact, who have registered as participants for the Vienna Energy Forum 2021 from 142 countries. 150 plus meetings were scheduled just today. So really, bravo. You guys are meeting, you're getting things done. It's really all about action, no matter how you make it happen. And that action continues tomorrow at 9 a.m. It will kick off with reimagining our energy systems. I'm Sarah Kelly in Vienna here at UNIDO. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll see you tomorrow morning. Take care, everyone.